Hello, Math 140 students. We're going to pick up on section 9.2, rational exponents. So we've already had a little bit of introduction to our radicals. So just to make sure we understand our vocabulary, we have the index, which is this little number inside. It defaults to be a 2 when there's nothing there. And we also have everything underneath the radical, which is the radicand, okay? And of course, we have the exponent here. Okay, so a rational exponent is an exponent that is a fraction. Recall how square roots can be expressed as an exponent to the power of 1/2. So the square root of 16, remember that index, even though you don't see it, it defaults to be a 2. So the way you write it, it's always going to be 1 over that index, okay? So the square root of 16 is really 16 to the 1/2. The square root of 25 is really 25 to the 1/2. The square root of 100 is really 100 to the 1/2. It's always 1 over the index. So here that 2 represents the index because it was the square root. It's not always going to be a square root. So let's take a look at some of these examples. It says rewrite as a radical expression. So if we want to rewrite it as a radical expression, that means we need the root symbol, right? That square root. But we have to pay attention to what the index is going to be. So that 5 is going to be the index. The index is always going to be the denominator. So then here I have my radical, and my index as my denominator is 5, so my index is 5. So I left with a u inside. So I have the 5th root of u. Now for part B, it's the same thing. We're going to look at this index. So remember, the index always comes from the denominator. So I'm going to have my radical, and here it's going to be a 5. Which must mean that that 3 is going to be my power, or your exponent. So I'm going to have w to the 3rd power. So I have the 5th root of w to the 3rd power. That's how you rewrite this radical expression. Now we're going to kind of do the opposite. Here what we want to do is write it as a rational exponent. So first off, we can kind of see that that 8 is being multiplied. So I'm going to exaggerate that so that way we can see it a little bit more clearly. So I have 8 that's being multiplied, and I have the 5th root of 4 to the x. So now 8 is going to be multiplied. I'm going to put this in parentheses where I have my 4x inside the parentheses, and remember my index is always going to be 1 over the index, so 1 to the 5th power. So this really means that I have 8 times 4x to the 1 over 5th power. Don't forget that index is always going to be 1 over whatever that index is. Now we're going to look at some calculations. So let's see how far we can get on our calculator. So now that I have my calculator up, you can go ahead and just plug it in directly, which is really nice. So I'm going to have parentheses 196, and the power button is right above the division sign, so to the power of, and now to put in that fraction, I'm going to press alpha y equals. That gives me my fraction. Now I have to the 1/2 power. So 196 to the 1/2 power is going to give me 14. So that's really nice that my calculator can help me do the math. So I'm going to go ahead and look at number 4 here. So I have negative 243 to the power of, oops, and I did one too many powers, and it's to the 1/5 power. And because it's an odd power, I don't really have to worry about that negative sign. And so I get my answer as a negative 3. So negative 3 is going to be my answer. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I keep using my calculator to help me out. So I have parentheses 32 to the power of, and now I'm going to have a negative power. So remember that negative exponent tells me that I'm going to kind of flip it around. So if I have 32 to the negative 2/5, that gives me a 0.25. Or better yet, if you don't want a fraction, it's going to give me a 1/4. So I have this as a positive 1/4. Or if you wanted that decimal, 0.25. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at number 6. So I have a negative 16 to the power of, oops, and it would be a 3/2. And that's going to give me a negative 64. So negative 64 is going to be my final answer there. Okay. Now what I want to do is go ahead and review my rules of exponents. So remember your rules of multiplication, the power rule, right? When two bases are being multiplied together and they're exactly the same, then you can add the exponents together. The power rule of division, that means that you can subtract the exponents if the bases are the same. If you have a negative power, that means to flip it. If you have a 0 power, anything to the 0 power is always going to equal to 1. And of course, now we have our radicals, so we can know that our denominator is going to be the index, and that numerator is going to be the power. So this is something you can't really put into your calculator, so we're going to have to remember our rules. So here, what this tells us, this rule is we are going to multiply. So I have j to the 10th power, and it's going to get multiplied by 7 over 5. Well, that's going to give me 70 over 5. But you can always simplify. So if I have 70 being divided by 5, that's going to give me 14. So I have j to the 14th power as my final answer. For number 2, since we have two p's that are being multiplied, so it's the exact same base, that tells me I'm going to add the exponents together. So I have p, and I'm going to go ahead and add these together. So I have 3/7, and my rule tells me to add these together, so 3/7 plus 18 over 7. So I know that 3 plus 18 is going to give me 21. So now I have 21 over 7. But of course you can simplify that. 21 divided by 7 is going to give me 3. So now my answer is going to be p to the 3rd power. Now for number 3, what's going on here is you're going to have to use your rule where you're going to have to subtract them. So I'm going to have r. Now I'm going to subtract these two exponents together. So I have 15 over 7, and it's going to be subtracted by an 8 over 7. So if I have 15 minus 8, that's going to give me 7. And my denominator is 7. So that's really 7 divided by 7, which is going to give me 1, which in reality is just r. So now I have my final answer as r. And that is the end of this section. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me or the Math Success Center. Thank you.